By 12:55 a.m., she lay capsized in the water off Fortune Island. 150 people were dead. Another 12 hours would pass before survivors were pulled from the sea. This is not a story about a storm that came without warning. It is a story about a warning that was ignored, a ship that should never have left port, and a captain's decisions that turned a sinking ship into a grave. The Princess of the Orient had carried a secret for 9 months. In December 1997, while docked in Manila, an engine room fire broke out. The ship was sent to Singapore for repairs, but when it returned, the automatic fin stabilizers, the only system of their kind on any Philippine domestic ferry at the time, were never restored to working order. The stabilizers remained non-operational. In the months that followed, the ship developed a noticeable list to port, a slight but visible tilt that crew members noticed and attributed to the fire damage. No one repaired it. The ship sailed on, carrying this mechanical defect like a disease nobody acknowledged. On September 18th, Captain Esrum Mahilum received a weather briefing before departure. Typhoon Gadding, called Typhoon Vicki internationally, was already positioned at the Carino-Pangasinan border in northern Luzon. This was a severe underestimation. Later meteorological analysis would reveal the actual wind speed was significantly higher, enough to trigger signal number 3, the highest storm warning that prohibits all vessel movement. But at 10 p.m., Captain Mahilum calculated that the typhoon was still a safe distance away. He ordered the Princess of the Orient to sea anyway. 2 hours into the voyage, waves of 7 to 8 meters were already striking the hull. The crew observed an initial list of 3 degrees to port. The angle increased steadily. Below deck, cargo, both solid and liquid, began to shift with each violent movement, sliding toward the starboard side of the hold, which made the port list worse. At 15 to 20 degrees of heel, the ship was becoming critical. Captain Mahilum ordered the engines reduced to 14 knots and ballast water pumped into the starboard heeling tank, attempting to counter the list. But those were not the maneuvers that sealed the ship's fate. It was what came next. Despite understanding the ship was already in danger, Captain Mahilum executed starboard maneuvers, steering moves intended to turn the bow away from the heavy portside waves. But on a ship listing 15 to 20 degrees, turning starboard did not ease the stress. It added to it. The maneuvers shifted the ship's weight distribution further. Cargo below that had already slid violently to port, slid even more. The list accelerated beyond the point of recovery. The ship's stability was gone. At 12:55 a.m., the Princess of the Orient capsized near Fortune Island, Cavite, and Batangas provinces. The capsize was not fast. Survivors would later describe the moment as almost dreamlike. The water coming in, the air filling with screams, the realization that the ship was not coming back up. Of the 388 people on board, most survived, but 150 did not. The survivors clung to wreckage, to floating debris, to each other, in water that was cold and rough. Rescue vessels did not reach the site until dawn. Those survivors who made it waited more than 12 hours in the sea before they were pulled to safety. The delay was not because rescuers were slow or unprepared. It was because no distress signal was sent immediately, and initial reports of the sinking took time to reach the authorities. By the time organized rescue operations began, the survivors had already endured hours of exposure, watching the sea consume their ship and their fellow passengers. The Board of Marine Inquiry investigation concluded that the immediate cause of the sinking was the captain's erroneous maneuvers. The starboard turns he executed were theoretically designed to reduce the ship's exposure to wave impact, but on a vessel already listing critically and with disabled stabilizers, those maneuvers were catastrophic. The BMI's report blamed Captain Mahilum directly for his decisions before and during the crisis. He had miscalculated the storm's distance and location. He had ordered the ship to sea despite warning. And when the emergency unfolded, he had chosen to maneuver rather than reduce speed further or call for immediate assistance. Sulpicio Lines, the ship's operator, was also found liable. Despite Captain Mahilum's prior serious incidents while commanding the Princess of the Orient, he had not been disciplined or removed from command. The court found that the sinking constituted gross negligence and incompetence by the crew. But the financial penalty was only part of the aftermath. The disaster exposed systemic failures in Philippine maritime regulation, non-repaired mechanical defects, inadequate weather forecasting coordination, permissive storm signal protocols that allowed large ferries to depart during conditions that were already dangerous, and insufficient oversight of captain selection and discipline. The Princess of the Orient sinking became a landmark case in Philippine maritime law, establishing corporate liability for negligence in vessel maintenance and captain vetting. In the years that followed, reforms were introduced to Philippine maritime oversight. Vessel seaworthiness inspections became mandatory. Weather-dependent sailing restrictions were tightened. Storm signal protocols were revised to prevent departures in what were clearly dangerous conditions. Captain discipline and vetting procedures became more rigorous. These changes did not bring back the 150 people who died on September 18, 1998, but they were intended to ensure that a convergence of disabled systems, weather miscalculation, and erroneous command decisions would not again be permitted to repeat. The story of the Princess of the Orient is not primarily a story about a storm. It is a story about decisions, some made years before the ship left port, others made in the hours and minutes before it capsized. The decision not to repair the stabilizers after the 1997 fire, the decision to send the ship to sea despite warnings, the decision to maneuver rather than hold course and reduce speed. Each choice in isolation might have been survivable. Together, they created a predictable tragedy. The investigation that followed documented this causal chain in meticulous detail. Philippine maritime law was changed because of it, and the names of those 150 passengers and crew remain the final testimony to what happens when known defects, weather, and human error align.